Shadow Hack. Chapter 271, Second Round. This isn't possible. How could he use flux energy under the suppression of the energy cover? Many people were shaken by the red sun which came out of Lee Yoon-mu's body. That red sun Lee Yoon-mu had spat out just then had clearly gotten rid of the 5 barbarous devil claws by instantaneously increasing the temperature in his surroundings. But shouldn't he be unable to use flux energy under the suppression of the energy cover? Even if Lee Yoon-mu used one of the destructive types of dark flux energy, the principle of suppression should have applied to them as well. Many people didn't understand what was going on, but seeing that Lee Yoon-mu had gotten rid of the 5 barbarous devil claws in an instant, they became aware that this person was deep and immeasurable. Lee Yoon-mu learned something from this display of his. The energy cover couldn't suppress all flux energy. For example, when Hai-yu had utilized some higher level energy waves, she had swiftly dealt with the barbarous devil claws. Now, after some testing, he had confirmed a hypothesis regarding what could and what couldn't be used. The flux energy was indeed suppressed inside the energy cover, but for dark flux energies, if their cultivation had reached a certain level and purity, then they could surpass the limit of the suppression. Lee Yoon-mu's tests allowed a lot of people to gain an inkling about it as well. After this, the first test continued on. Ling Shuang's turn came after some 900 contestants. When she was inside the energy cover, she followed in Lee Yoon-mu and Hai-yu's footsteps and used a pure dark flux energy to break past the suppression point. Wielding a great sword with both hands, she sliced down in the direction of the 5 barbarous devil claws. Sword energy rushed toward the beasts. Under the suppression of the energy cover, she had surprisingly released almost transparent sword energy. She is worthy of being called Sword Sage's latest disciple. Although she hasn't spent a lot of time on the path of cultivation, this doesn't stop her from advancing quickly and reaching the front of the pack. Ling Shuang, Lee Yoon-mu, Hai-yu, all of them are pretty good. They've already grasped a power unique to them. Battle Sage Jing, the red sun which Lee Yoon-mu used just now should mean that he had cultivated the Great Sun secret technique of H.A.C.K sect. All the great characters on the platform were discussing the youths, but the people underneath the platform, as well as those watching on the online platforms, couldn't hear them. The first test continued, and soon came Lee Qinghong's turn. By then, many people had realized that Lee Yoon-mu had just been dragging time so she would be able to return. Lin Jian and the other followers hadn't expected that Lee Qinghong would stay within the Tower of Glory for so long. However, they knew that she must have obtained some opportunity in the Tower of Glory so that once she came out, her strength would be incomparable to before. When confronted with the 5 barbarous devil claws, she didn't waste any energy on them. She stabbed her frightening imperial spear in their direction a couple times, and with every stab, faint fire energy appeared at the tip of her spear. Spear energy. Lee Qinghong's performance brought a shock even to the people on the platform. Her Sun God flame energy had merged with the frightening imperial spear's deadly skill. This was what she had exchanged her tower badges for upon passing the 70th level of the Tower of Glory. The usage of this power wasn't as simple as just wrapping the weapon with a layer of flux energy, instead, it could be classified as her own power. It was a type of force created after gaining deeper comprehension of her own battle skill. This sort of force allowed the user to display their power to the limit. However, it required more than just a formidable might. One also needed a sort of mental state so as to allow the intent to merge. At this time, Lee Qinghong had clearly reached this point. The spearhead, which seemed to contain her willpower, stabbed again and again at the barbarous devil claws. 5 successive stabs were enough to instantly kill all of the beasts. She accomplished everything so easily that it seemed like those actions were done on instinct. Ling Shuang, who was also walking a similar path, hadn't expected that Lee Qinghong would be able to utilize the frightening imperial spear's deadly technique to this stage. At this instant, when everyone looked at Lee Qinghong, their gazes on her were completely different from before. If Demon, Barbarian Niu, and Lin Jian's performance had forced the overlords to give them an evaluation of being powerful, then Li Qinghong's display of force had caused the group of people to view her as their equal. Soon after, came the turn of Hai Yu's little sister, Qing Yu. She didn't disappoint and summoned a pair of blue ocean fish. These fish were extremely small, to the extent of resembling a paper clip. But these paper clip-sized fishes could not only fly in the air but also use their bodies as weapons to attack. The two blue fish swiftly moved to attack, penetrating the skin of the 5 barbarous devil claws. After they came out, a hole was left in the hearts of the dimensional beasts, who then fell to the ground. The blue ocean fish traveled at an extremely quick speed. According to rumors, these fish summoned by Qing Yu were an ancient ocean fish life form. They were known as ocean shuttle swordfish. A total of 1,263 contestants had qualified for the continental battle. After the first test was concluded, out of that many, there were around 138 participants who had forfeited. These 100 or so people didn't have the necessary strength to continue and had only become qualified by relying on external assistance. If their flux energy wouldn't have been suppressed by the energy cover, then by relying on external assistance and treasures, they would have dealt with 5 rainbow light devil kings, let alone 5 barbarous devil claws. However, after being denied their flux energy and treasures, they were nothing special. In fact, their strength was at most comparable to heavenly dragon Tang family's Tang Ruokan. Thus, those who had such puny strength didn't wish to die and could only forfeit. Apart from them, there were 70-something people who had obtained the qualifications but hadn't arrived at the Black Dragon Island. These 70-something people were also considered as having forfeited. As for those who participated in the test, there were some 250 people who were eaten by the starved barbarous devil claws within the energy covers. Among these 250 people, some didn't have sufficient experience, some had underestimated the enemy, while some had made mistakes which cost them their lives. All of them, however, were seen as one-thing losers who had been unable to fight with their flux energy suppressed. From among the 1,000-something contestants, those who had cleared the test were only the formidable rising stars of the 6 continents. Once the first test was finished, it was time to continue. But it was unknown what sort of understanding the quasi-deities had reached, and neither was it known who they had chosen as opponents for the participants of the continental battle. Everyone spent the night at the Black Dragon Island. On the second day, the Alliance's representative announced the second round soul strength test. Once the theme of the second round was announced, many people were startled. What was happening in this year's continental battle? It had changed unrecognizably from the knockout battles held in the previous years. After the test of flesh, it was now the test of the soul. For everyone who cultivated flux energy, soul strength was always second on their list of things to prioritize. Chapter 272, Goddess Medusa. System: can you analyze the hidden purpose behind this continental battle? At this moment, the 712 fluxers who had cleared the first round of the continental battle yesterday had gathered in front of a sculpture. Most of the people couldn't understand what exactly was the intention behind the competition. Although they knew it was related to the heavenly transformation, the tests were just too obscure. Fluxers who couldn't use their flux energy, could they still be called fluxers? But even with such thought, whether it were the contestants or the spectators, they could only voice them in their hearts. According to the system, the higher-ups were collecting people who fulfilled requirements only known to them under the pretense of the continental battle. It came to the conclusion that there were 3 conditions so far. First, their cultivation cannot surpass the flux disciple layer. This is the most important thing. Second, they must possess formidable combat strength and survival ability even after losing flux energy. Third, their souls must be able to endure some powerful test and not be influenced by it. Under the comprehensive analysis, in addition to the bits of information acquired by host regarding the heavenly transformation, the system has reached a conclusion that the human alliance, the 6 transcending powers, and Fluxer Association had reached a mutual agreement. They all seem to be using the continental battle to choose a group of Fluxers who could satisfy these 3 conditions, so they could send them to some place which has similar conditions. Hearing the system's detailed answer, Yoon-mu couldn't help but take a deep breath. Even the parts which he couldn't understand previously had become clear now. One of the things among them was the qualifications to descend which Lin Yuero had mentioned to him, but he hadn't understood at that time. Yep, that should be about descending to an all-new environment. The contestants who will win will be the chosen chess pieces of the people who formed the top layer of Earth's power pyramid. There might be people who didn't want to act as chess pieces, but if due to that they lost an opportunity like this and fell a step behind, they would continue to fall further and further away from the top. Even the transcending powers who were considered as the most powerful in the world had the same intention, which clearly illustrated that the significance of this competition for qualifications to descend was far more important compared to what Yoon-mu had thought. With his analysis, his expectations rose up again. Then why did Battle Sage and Jing use this opportunity to confirm the existence of Li's sect and make its name famous? What are the intentions of Battle Sage Vega and her? Yoon-mu kept asking this himself, his brows puckered. He wasn't the least bit fond of the feeling of being a chess piece of world's major powers and not being allowed to act on his own. He actually detested it to the extreme. But even if he wasn't fond of it, that didn't mean he could escape from it. Every one of his fellow Flux disciples was someone's chess piece, even the formidable ones like Zihanbei or Man Tian were no exception. But couldn't a chess piece use the opportunity to suddenly become one of the players? Perhaps all the contestants were thinking the same thing. Yoon-mu was convinced that anyone who could clear the 70th level of the Tower of Glory wasn't weak or a fool. Perhaps under the influence of the heavenly transformation, Flux sages as well as quasi-deities were only more formidable chess pieces and nothing more. Once Yoon-mu reached this conclusion, even if he hadn't understood the aim of the two Battle Sage Vegas clearly, he still became aware of what was truly going on here. But there was nothing to it. He had to first use this opportunity provided by the continental battle and wait for it to be over, then think about it. Everyone thought that the second round, the soul strength test, would be executed like the first one, with the contestants being called to the stage one after another. Thus, the Alliance's representative's announcement caught everyone off guard. All the contestants were brought in front of a female snake witch's sculpture, and after a split second, this snake witch's sculpture suddenly opened its pair of ruby eyes. These eyes so beautiful. Under the terrified gazes of people watching on the online platforms, as soon as the snake witch's sculpture opened its eyes, all the 700 or so contestants lost their consciousness while remaining seated in cross-legged position, with no exceptions. Goddess Medusa, this is the statue of Goddess Medusa. My God, what am I looking at? These lords are crazy, how could they dare to bring the image of Goddess Medusa into this world? On the online network, someone suddenly cried out in fear after seeing the sculpture. Clearly, a person who knew this sculpture wasn't that simple. Senior, what is this Goddess Medusa's sculpture? Why is it so terrifying? Even people like Hai Yu, Zhanhua, and others have lost their consciousness. Yes, don't cry out in horror but quickly explain this stuff to us. You said it was an image of a goddess, so doesn't this mean that this senior Medusa is a deity? It isn't a genuine deity. According to rumors, 173 years ago, traces of a shrine was discovered somewhere in the seventh dimension. When a battle god and other quasi-deities opened it together, this goddess Medusa stood inside the hall of the shrine. It was one of the four main subordinates of the master of the shrine. At that time, when the shrine was just opened, it opened its eyes once. That time, under its gaze, out of the 11 quasi-deities including 5 battle sages, 3 barbarian kings, and 3 ocean emperors, 2 barbarian kings, 1 battle sage, and 1 ocean emperor were turned to stone to remain eternally within the shrine. The second time it opened its eyes was 70 years ago. It's sigh that a domain sage entered the shrine and brought it back to the human world. The outcome of that was that all people and other living creatures of Sunday City were turned into stone, making Sunday City a history, including the domain sage who had brought the statue. When the people on the online platforms heard about the previous deeds of this statue of goddess Medusa, they all felt a chill run down their spine. What? So the reason why Sunday City was named a forbidden region was this? I can't believe. The most confusing thing is that the explanation written in the books of our educational institutes regarding Sunday City being turned into a forbidden region is that an extremely powerful demon broke through the dimensional border and descended onto Earth. Yes, all the books talk about the same thing. This formidable demon was fond of sculptures and stones. It captured many artists and created a stone city to use for a lair for himself. That's right. I checked the books again. In the end, the masters of the 6 transcending powers joined hands and killed this demon, but the demonic soul of the creature couldn't be exterminated and still haunts Sunday City. Thus, the Alliance had to seal Sunday City for all eternity so as to prevent people from entering. Everyone kept talking about it, trying to confirm what they had learned previously. No one believed that Sunday City wasn't created by a demon who had captured countless artisans, but was turned into stone right away. Haha. The senior who had previously spoken about goddess Medusa could only laugh bitterly, not bothering to debate anymore. But regardless of whether the people believed it or not, once this senior had said all those things, an unexplainable dread rose in the hearts of the majority of people toward goddess Medusa. Chapter 273, Medusa's Dreamland. The 700-something contestants seemed to have entered a world of dreams. Regardless of whether it were the people present on the Black Dragon Island or the people who were watching the online broadcast, none of them dared to breathe loudly but were closely watching the contestants. A minute passed, but everything remained silent. 5 minutes passed, but everything still remained silent. 10 minutes passed, and suddenly, the facial muscles of Hai-Yu twitched slightly, and the next instant she woke up with a calm face. Good, good, good. Atop the platform, the Ocean Emperor who was representing the people of the sea couldn't help but stand up and praise her after seeing this scene. For senior domain sages and quasi-deity level experts, the first test about the strength of one's body only had some importance, but this second test about the strength of soul and willpower was of comparatively higher importance. Given that Hai-Yu was the first to awaken among all the talents of the 6 continents, her future prospects were boundless. Furthermore, she had clearly displayed the strength of her mental fortitude in this test. Very good indeed, 10 minutes and 18 seconds. A person like this is quite rare. Ling Shuang's master sword sage also praised her while caressing his beard. Time continued to pass, and finally, after 13 minutes, the second person also awakened. It was the ascetic fluxer Fan Kong. An unknown ascetic fluxer. On the online network, everyone felt that this underdog had indeed been too low-key. This ascetic cultivator Fan Kong, who was he? In the last round of corporeal body test, his performance had been out of ordinary. Although overlords had taken all the glory, they couldn't dim his brilliance. And now in the second round, he had surprisingly come second, just after Hai-Yu. Regardless of whether you are a ghost or a monster, in front of me, Z-Hanbei, you will be exterminated. Bang! Suddenly, an astonishing pressure erupted from Z-Hanbei. It was as if he had turned into a heaven-shaking battle god. He opened his eyes and woke up with a brilliance radiating off his body. This child resembles battle god in his younger days. He could be cultivated, for he's a material worth nurturing, but unfortunately he is too arrogant. Indeed, people like him are quite rare. These youngsters like Z-Hanbei and Hai-Yu will be the hope of our Earth in the future. That's right, Z-Hanbei's mental fortitude is quite staunch. Ordinary people will find it quite hard to stand on the same level as him. He tried to use force to break the dream, and I hadn't expected that he would actually be able to accomplish that. Before long, Zhang suddenly opened his eyes, clearly aware of what had happened a moment ago. Zhang has a stable temperament, War God Temple Seedling is quite outstanding. Atop the platform, the group of quasi-deities slightly nodded towards the few people who had woken up one after another, signifying their approval. The body of Ling Shuang, who was sitting on the ground, suddenly shined slightly. The light gradually congealed, forming a heavenly sword. It was facing towards the sky and directly thrust out from her head, piercing through the blue dome of heaven. After this, she became the fifth contestant to wake up and pass the test, right after Zhang Huia. This caused a commotion among the spectators. None of them had expected that Ling Shuang would be the fifth person, because previously, although her performance hadn't been lacking, it also wasn't outstanding. But many Flux sages looked at Sword Sage sitting on the platform with a gaze filled with respect and veneration. Sword Sage's disciple could actually display Sword Sage's ability. According to rumors, if Battle God hadn't found the fourth part of the Supreme Battle Suit, then there wouldn't much difference between his strength and that of Sword Sage. At this moment, this rumor didn't seem the least bit false. As long as the Sword Fluxers could properly cultivate sword energy, then they could exterminate everything with it. Clearly, Ling Shuang and Zihanbei were walking on the same path, using power to destroy the dream. But the sword energy which Ling Shuang had utilized was even swifter and fiercer compared to Zihanbei's fist energy. After all, she hadn't been cultivating for a long time. What bulls asterisk at goddess Medusa, everything is false. One punch filled with enormous strength will break it all. No one can bar my path, not even deities. Almost at the same time, Man Tian and Mammoth Barbarian Wahang erupted with shocking strength, and the next instant, both of them also woke up. Whether these people relied on the strength of their soul or the arrogance within their heart, they used their own unique powers to awaken from the illusion created by goddess Medusa. Frightening dragon. My goal is to become a domain sage and throw away the shackles off myself. Break for me. Suddenly, a rainbow-colored light came from around Li Qinghong's body. The rainbow-colored long dragon and Chao Tian sage bird rose from her body. First, the long dragon quickly scuttled out of the top of her head and slammed against the blue dome of heaven. It didn't break. Then, Li Qinghong, who was sitting with her eyes closed, shouted out again, "Break!" The next instant, the undying sage bird followed in the footsteps of the rainbow dragon and flew into the sky. Everyone heard a sound of something breaking, and at this time, Li Qinghong also became sober-headed. Surprisingly, she was the eighth contestant to clear this round. Li Qinghong being able to wake up so swiftly astonished the people even more compared to Fan Kong. On the platform, the complexion of the sect master of Chao Tian sect turned ashen. First, there was the red sun which Li Yoon-mu had produced. It could be related to Chao Tian sect's secret technique in countless ways, and now, among the two illusionary images which rose from the body of Li Qinghong, one was the undying sage bird, which was related to the most precious treasure of their sect. If the alliance hadn't declared that after the continental battle started no person or power could kill one of the contestants, sect master probably would have already rushed out to catch them. Surprisingly, it's this woman. Good, she's a really good seedling, Battle Sage Vega said in praise. It's really unusual. Even though she lowered herself to become someone's follower, her willpower hasn't degraded. Man Tian's father, Barbarian King Northfield, also joined in the praise. Other quasi-deity level characters nodded in succession to show their approval. Li Qinghong being the eighth person to wake up was contrary to all their expectations. This female has obtained a great opportunity in the recent times. I could sense a hint of ancient dragon bloodline from her, Barbarian King Coiling Dragon said. No wonder, no wonder. With the ancient dragon bloodline joined with the undying sage blood, Li Qinghong's future prospects can't be measured. When Flux sages looked at this scene, they all noted down Li Qinghong's name. But whenever someone's gaze fell on Li Yoon-mu, who was still unconscious, they couldn't help out but force out a bitter smile. What was going on here? A follower had awakened faster than the master. At this time, Li Yoon-mu didn't know what was happening in the outside world. He also wasn't aware that Li Qinghong had awakened faster than him, which put him as the master in an embarrassing position. Right then, he was within the Dreamland, and his surroundings contained a dense tropical rainforest. He had an animal's skin draped over his shoulders as if he had returned to the most chaotic era at the beginning of the world. If it had been some ordinary contestant, they wouldn't know that the situation they faced was a dream. However, Yoon-mu had the little female ancestor by his side, and with the system's reminder, he knew about it from the start. Chapter 274, Heaven and Earth have nothing on me. Little ancestor, where should we go? While Yoon-mu was walking through the dense jungle, the little female ancestor of the Shadow clan sat on his shoulder. After being nurtured for so long, she had grown to a height of 13 centimeters from the original 10 centimeters. According to the system's calculations, she had to reach the height of 30 centimeters to be considered an adult. Difficult, very difficult. But Yoon-mu felt that this height couldn't be considered as large, either. There was nothing he could do about it, though. After all, it was impossible for him to let her return to the Shadow clan in the 7th dimension to accept offerings. He simply didn't have the strength to do anything about this problem. If he didn't encounter any special events, it was hard to tell how long it'll take for the little ancestor to grow. But even so, the existence of the little shadow was Yoon-mu's most powerful trump card. With her around, he could utilize the power of a flux sage at any time he wished. On top of that, he also didn't need to worry about soul-related attacks and illusions. For example, this dreamland he'd just entered. While other people could only bitterly struggle to break out of the dreamland, Yoon-mu was awake from the time he'd entered because of the existence of the little ancestor. With just a thought, he could shatter the dreamland and return to the outside world. Initially, he was planning to do so, but the little shadow ancestor had insistently nudged his shoulder, pointing towards a mountain peak in the distance, so he had no choice but to stay and check it out. This was the first time the little ancestor had taken the initiative to make a request. Looking at her little face, which was full of anxiousness and expectations, Yoon-mu's heart was moved, and he quickly advanced in the direction she was pointing. While he walked forward, he passed countless poisonous insects as well as vipers who he cautiously avoided, moving with haste toward his target. Not good, this body is such trash. How did I become an ordinary person again? After walking for more than half an hour through the dense rainforest and brambles, Yoon-mu found it extremely hard to advance forward. He had been moving for so long, but the mountain was still too far. When he turned to survey his surroundings, he discovered that he hadn't made much progress. Host, this is your dream. At this time, the system finally couldn't remain quiet. And I know I'm within a dream, but this terrain is constructed by that statue of goddess Medusa. Since it is your dream, you are the true ruler, the system said again. Yoon-mu suddenly became thoughtful, and after staying in the same location for a long while, he suddenly spat out a couple words. I understand. Since this is my dream, I'm the god and not that goddess Medusa's image. Raising his head towards the sky, he said, I want to regain my previous glory and strength. Bang! For an instant, Yoon-mu only sensed enormous power pouring into his currently ordinary body, then it was refined. He felt as if his entire body, from top to bottom, was in possession of endless power. The flux energy seed within his mind began to grow without any base. One after another, flux points began to open and fill up. In the blink of an eye, the 72 flux points of a rainbow crystal fluxer began to connect like a spider web. Then thunder began to form, relying on the flux energy to flow around, coiling around it, appearing like a thunder dragon. His abdomen became warm and the red sun took shape once more, bathing his body in its red light. With just one sentence, his power had returned back to him. The system's words were correct, this was Yoon-mu's dream. And since it belonged to him, he was the most powerful existence in this place. If he had not known all this and been ignorant like others, then it wouldn't matter much. But now that he could see through the nature and rules of this place, he was like a god in here. I'm God. Let us experience the power of being a deity in advance. Yoon-mu visualized a red sun in his mind, and the next instant, he raised his hands toward the sky. A red sun formed between them. Initially, it was only of the size of a tennis ball, but in the next breath it grew to the size of a large stone, and after another breath, it was already the size of a house. But it wasn't sufficient. Yoon-mu continued to visualize the red sun within his consciousness, and it swelled more, becoming boundless. I don't like rainforest islands, and I don't like this dreamland. Apart from that mountain, destroy everything for me. The next instant, Yoon-mu stopped holding onto the enormous red sun. He let it go, allowing it to slip from his fingers and fall to the ground. Instantly, the rainforest island as well as the endless ocean filled with red flames released by the red sun. The entire world was burned down to a crisp, only the lone mountain staying untouched. Absolute power. This is the absolute power mentioned by the system. Yoon-mu hadn't expected that within this dream, he would be able to experience the absolute power beforehand. In front of it, what soul strength test, what willpower test, what mental fortitude test, all of them were just children toys. Yoon-mu, didn't need any of them. He only needed absolute power, and all the obstructions barring his way would explode and evaporate. After all the thorns and trees were removed by the red sun, there was no longer any pathway before Yoon-mu but a flat plain all around him. He no longer needed to labor strenuously to cleave open the thorns to move forward. Since this was his world, the path he took would become a road on itself. Thud. Yoon-mu, whose power had been restored, pushed off the ground and, like a human-shaped monster, rushed toward the distant mountain. Compared to walking with difficulty previously, the difference was like heaven and earth. But quickly, an extremely bizarre thing happened. Given the explosive speed of his corporeal body, even if he didn't use any of his footwork skills, he should have reached the mountain long ago, regardless of how far it was. However, the distant mountain remained far away no matter how much he rushed toward it. Something's not right. Sure enough, a thing which can attract the attention of the female ancestor will be extraordinary. Yoon-mu paused for a moment, then unleashed ghostly evasion. In the real world, his flux energy could only support it for 30 minutes, but within the dream world, he didn't need to worry about his flux energy being depleted. However, after an hour, he still wasn't any closer to the mountain. By then, Yoon-mu had become aware that he couldn't just rely on brute force but needed to stop and think rationally. However, this was in contradiction to what he'd decided before. Since I'm the most powerful existence in this world, why should I passively decipher this? The mountain peak, come here for me. Yoon-mu didn't approach the mountain peak but instead made a grab for it. Immediately, a mighty force appeared out of nowhere, and the mountain peak in the distance began to shudder. All the trees on the mountain were crushed or uprooted, and large cracks began to open up in the land at the foot of the mountain as if caused by an earthquake. Meaningless resistance. Yoon-mu thought of something right away. He realized the reason why the little shadow ancestor had been pointing toward that mountain. This peak was the place from where goddess Medusa was pouring its power to create illusions. He could sense the place still resisting his call. However, in here, he was the god. If this dreamland had a god, that was him, not goddess Medusa. Come here for me, Yoon-mu commanded once more. The mountain peak trembled, and unable to resist the power of the command, it began to rapidly flow toward Yoon-mu. Chapter 275, Snake Scale. Come here for me, Yoon-mu commanded once more. The mountain peak trembled, and unable to resist the power of the command, it began to rapidly flow toward Yoon-mu. Soon, it fell into his palm. What is this? Yoon-mu opened his palm, but the enormous mountain peak from before couldn't be seen anymore. Only a ball of mud lay in his hand. Yoon-mu applied some pressure on it, and the soil dripped away, revealing a fingernail-sized rhombus-shaped scale. It was deep green with some deep purple added to the mix, and it was clear at first glance that it was an extraordinary item. Could it be that this scale belonged to goddess Medusa? Yoon-mu was slightly shaken, but the female ancestor had no such emotions. After having waited by the side for a long time, she could no longer control herself and transformed into a black light that rushed into the scale. Even though Yoon-mu tried to stop her, he couldn't do it in time. F***ck this, I've completely lost all connection with the little shadow ancestor. Yoon-mu was extremely astonished as well as baffled. The little shadow ancestor had disappeared. After she entered the scale, it was as if she had entered another dimension. This was the first time Yoon-mu had completely lost all connection with her. This piece of scale, what exactly is it? Why was the little shadow ancestor so excited about it? And why as soon as she saw it, she rushed inside without caring for anything else? Yoon-mu had not the slightest idea about how to answer these questions. Bang! Once the source of energy holding the Dreamland disappeared, the world and the sky collapsed, and the Dreamland shattered. When Yoon-mu opened his eyes again, he discovered that he had already returned to the outside world. 167th contestant, Central Continent's Yoon-mu has passed the second round. When Yoon-mu awakened, he immediately heard the loud voice of the Alliance representative declaring his rank. More than 100 people had awakened before Yoon-mu, but he was completely indifferent toward it. He had reaped good harvest from the test. As for his rank, it was useless. With the little shadow ancestor by his side, if he had wanted to break from the Dreamland, he would have just needed to wish for it. If not for the little shadow ancestor noisily insisting that he should reach the mountain, he would have been the first person to clear this round. Wait a minute, mountain, scale, the little shadow ancestor entering the scale. What about the scale I obtained in the dream? Yoon-mu didn't care about the peculiar gazes of the people around him in the least and immediately opened his hand to take a look. To his surprise, he discovered that his hand was completely empty. There was nothing in it. Then, when he was suffering from the unspeakable despair of having lost not only the treasure but the little female ancestor as well, a faint flicker of a peculiar light came from his palm. A green snake scale with purple designs on it suddenly appeared in the hollow of his hand. It was real. The snake scale which he had grabbed in the dream was surprisingly genuine and had somehow merged with the hollow of his palm. That meant that the little shadow ancestor was still in his possession. At this moment, Yoon-mu had a feeling that she had discovered something unknown to him within. But as long as the snake scale was under his control, the little shadow ancestor would return. It was something he was sure of instinctually. Yoon-mu had been quite late in waking up. By this time, many people had already cleared the test. When he surveyed his surroundings, he discovered that even of his 4 followers who were participating in the continental battle, 3 had woken up before him. Li Qinghong, Lin Jian, and Demon had come to his side, which only left Barbarian Niu. At this moment, the few quasi-deities who were paying attention to Yoon-mu couldn't help but sigh. Yoon-mu's strength had increased at an unusually terrifying rate. Even the word abnormal could be used to describe it. His unparalleled defense as well as the great sun reaching the major threshold. His unparalleled defense as well as his great sun reaching a major threshold made even the quasi-deities sitting on the platform think highly of him, but the soul strength test had caused all of them to shake their heads simultaneously. 2 hours and 36 minutes to clear the second test? 167th rank? No one had anticipated that Yoon-mu, who had shown so much potential and strength previously, would surprisingly slip up in the soul strength test. Although he had passed, his performance fell way short of everyone's expectations. After all, the soul strength test's meaning was to test the strength of one's soul. It included one's resolve and perception, willpower as well as mental fortitude. This test was extremely complex and more important than the previous one. If the first test showed the probability of the contestant being able to enter the sage layer in the future, then the soul strength test revealed whether that person would be able to congeal his sacred domain and become a real domain sage. If one couldn't congeal a domain and become a battle sage, then there was no need to even speak of reaching the next layer and becoming a quasi-deity. As for the level above that, it shouldn't even be mentioned. Haha, apparently Lee Yoon-mu is quite impressive, but it's all useless. His mental fortitude is this weak. I'm quite disappointed to have thought of him as a formidable opponent previously. Jia began to laugh, while Hanbei revealed a hint of disappointment mixed with disdain. Before today, he had treated this newcomer Fluxer as a rival since he'd made him feel a sense of oppression, but only disappointment was now left in his heart. Elder sister, this is the first time you've made an error in judgment, Qing Yu said in faint voice to her sister Hai Yu. When Hai Yu looked at Lee Yoon-mu's expressions, a hint of suspicion rose in her heart. But she didn't say anything, even if she trusted her intuition. Previously, when Man Tian and the others had felt that Lee Yoon-mu wasn't an opponent on the same level as them, she had sensed that he wasn't so simple. Now that he revealed such a big weakness, she couldn't understand the situation. I hadn't expected that the person considered to be the most difficult to kill in the fifth dimension would have such a huge weakness. Interesting, truly interesting. Although Yeqing didn't reveal his feelings, he began to scheme inwardly. Lee Yoon-mu had spoilt the plans of the Chao Tian sect many times by then, and the hatred born from it was irreconcilable. Everything they had done till now was just for appearances. There was no way they could establish a friendly relation with someone who'd foiled them so many times. At this moment, each of the contestants sitting in front of the sculpture was quick-witted, and all of them were thinking about the same thing. In fact, all the people who had qualified for the continental battle could be considered rivals. Once an overlord-level character revealed such a huge weakness, many noted it down. Lee Yoon-mu's wasn't feeling good, either. He had really reached his current level very quickly, it wasn't that long that he'd started his cultivation. The weakness of his soul had always been a problem. Previously, with the little shadow ancestor by his side, he could ignore everything, but things had changed now. Due to the scale he obtained within the dream, he lost the protection of the little shadow ancestor for the time being. Whether it was a bane or a boon, only time could tell. Chapter 276, Shattered. The second test continued on after Lee Yoon-mu had been the 167th person to awaken. With only half an hour remaining of the 3-hour limit, many people believed that a lot more people should be awakening at this time. All the quasi-deities on the stage were looking attentively at the image of goddess Medusa with complicated expressions. Crack! Suddenly, there was a sound from the statue. It caught all the people off guard. The piece of snake scale at the center of goddess Medusa's image ruptured and fell off. At this instant, it was as if the statue had lost all of its mysterious power. The statue began to crack, and then turned into powder. A gust of wind blew past, picking up that dust and scattering it all over the arena. There was soon no trace of the statue left. Goddess Medusa's image was destroyed? All the quasi-deities immediately stood up. They kept looking at the scene with their brows creased tightly and complicated expressions. Perhaps my estimation was wrong. The drainage of power from this image of true God had reached a level that was too severe, so there really isn't any true God in our world, said an old man with a sigh and a hint of disappointment on his face. He was the representative of Holy Spirit continent's ruling power. Even the image of a true God, which they had obtained from a relic of a demigod, had turned to dust after the true God was gone. The group of quasi-deities couldn't help but feel despair. There was no true God in this world, and even the remnants left behind by deities were getting fewer and fewer in number. This was the greatest regret of the people who formed the top layer of humanity's power pyramid. This group had already reached the highest height they could achieve. There was no path to advance further for them. Even if the whole of humanity called them quasi-deities and looked upon them as half-deities, without any path to advance forward, they could only despair after reaching this point. Everyone, heavenly transformation is our only opportunity. It can provide a new path for humanity to advance in the future, so we must not lose hope, Battle Sage Vega said promptly. Yes, we shouldn't lose our self-control. That's right, whatever the case may be, this opportunity created by the heavenly transformation, even if we all won't be able to benefit from it, humankind will do so certainly. A whole new power structure should be born in the future. Above the quasi-deities, some path is certain to exist. These previously appeared demigods are our true guides. When all is said and done, quasi-deities are quasi-deities, they are people with staunch determination. Immediately, their battle spirit was roused again, and it was even denser than before. This time's heavenly transformation was going to change everything. Not only the people above the platform, even the many flux sages were all extremely hopeful inwardly. Their gazes passed over people like Hai Yu, Man Tian, Zi Hanbei, Zhang Huia, and even Ling Shuang and Ji Wuxin. Among the hope that filled their expressions, some other emotions were mixed in as well. Underneath the platform, there were 500 people who were still lost within the dreamland created by the image of goddess Medusa. They were going to awaken now, once the image of goddess Medusa had shattered. These yet to awaken contestants woke up one after another, because the dreamland had lost its source of power. Dang, how can this Li Yoon-mu's luck be so enormously good? He became the last person to wake up. If he'd been slower by at least 1 minute, he'd be part of this group of unlucky fluxers who are now automatically considered as having lost. What a disappointment, I'm truly let down today. Li Yoon-mu was supposed to be extremely fierce, so how could he fall out of the top 100? Haha, so this is the level of an overlord's strength, truly unimpressive. The other 29 overlords are all ranked within the first 50. Senior, you who previously said that goddess Medusa's image is so terrifying, haven't you lost all face now? At most, it was just a testing tool and nothing more. See now, it was just a one-use item which shattered right after. Fancy that, when he explained about the image, you all immediately believed him. Ha, what first time it opened its eyes, 5 quasi-deities were turned to stones, second time it opened its eyes, entire Sunday city was turned to stone. Such an exaggeration, and you all were convinced by his words. Even I was taken in by you all. Regardless of what the powerhouses atop the platform or the netizens in their forums discussed, the 500 contestants that were forcefully woken up once the statue shattered were full of disappointment. It was so unexpected, completely out of anyone's consideration. Even the quasi-deities hadn't expected that the power of the goddess Medusa's image would be depleted so quickly. The 500 contestants who hadn't passed the round still had half an hour's time based on the rules. What did that mean? Silence. The representative of the alliance quickly received word from his superiors and loudly shouted out for attention, regaining the stage. All the people who hadn't cleared the round will be given a chance to make up for it. You'll be paired with random opponents. As long as you obtain 2 consecutive wins, you will be considered as having cleared the second test. It was clear that they had been forced to make this decision, since a test which was related to one's soul strength had been converted to league battles. They couldn't not do this, though. If they wanted to keep things fair. In any case, only the 167 contestants who had cleared the round were those that mattered to the powerhouses sitting on the platform. As for the others who'd be selected through the battle, they'd just make up the numbers. The rules for the duels were very simple to engage in combat without any rules. Every fight would have a 5-minute time limit, making the tournament very quick. Although this wasn't quite fair to some people who were certain to have cleared the soul strength test, it was a pleasant surprise to those who wouldn't have succeeded in it. Regardless of whichever group the contestants belonged to, they could only rely on their personal strength to advance to the next round. Barbarian Niu was among the group of the people who were yet to clear the test. He was quite fortunate, though, since this supplementary test attached most importance to one's combat strength. This Barbarian Niu's strength is even greater than that of Li Qinghong and Lin Jian. His power can already threaten the 30 overlords. But what's the use? He is the same as his master, both of them have formidable combat strength, but the strength of their soul is lacking. Although he appears extremely dazzling now, it is foreordained that he won't advance much further. Both those who were present on the scene and those who were watching the broadcast had the same evaluation. But at this time, Lee Yoon-mu's mind wasn't here. He was full of astonishment, for he had just learned that the piece of snake scale he had forcefully snatched from within the Dreamland was actually the core part of goddess Medusa's image. He had surprisingly snatched the core part of goddess Medusa's image under the gazes of the group of quasi-deities. And these great people were yet to realize that. The supplementary test concluded very quickly. Because of the presence of many Flux sages on the Black Dragon Island, there was no one among the Flux disciples who suffered major loss or lost their lives because of the battles being too fierce. Approximately 140 people were left. In other words, from the 700-something participants of this soul strength test, only 310 people had successfully passed. The Alliance representative informed them that they had 3 days to prepare for the next round. The 310 contestants rushed to do so with great zeal. At this time, Lee Yoon-mu finally met up with Battle Sage Jing once more. "Your Majesty, what is it?" Lee Yoon-mu asked while staring at Battle Sage Jing, who had appeared quietly in his tent. Chapter 277, Explosive Truth. "Your Ladyship, what is it?" Lee Yoon-mu asked while staring at Battle Sage Jing, who had appeared quietly in his tent. "As things stand, there are some matters which cannot be concealed from you any longer," Battle Sage Jing told him right away to dispel his suspicions. "Lee Yoon-mu, how much do you know about the heavenly transformation?" "Not much. Although I have a few guesses, I don't know anything definite. I hope your ladyship will tell me a few things." When Lee Yoon-mu heard Battle Sage Jing mention the matter of heavenly transformation, he sucked in a deep breath and could only follow along. He knew that whatever he tried to pull in front of Battle Sage Vega or Battle Sage Jing, it would come to naught. He didn't have the capital to seize the initiative in front of them, so he could only follow along. To act as a chess piece, he had to know what a chess piece should know. Regarding this fact, he was extremely clear. If he wanted to break out of this role, he couldn't rely on just running his mouth and idiotic bravery. "Oh, seems like you really don't have any background. Your knowledge regarding the heavenly transformation is even smaller compared to what I thought." Battle Sage Jing nodded, then continued to speak. "Then what do you know about this world we live in?" "Know about our Earth?" Lee Yoon-mu felt a headache when he heard this. Before obtaining the system, he'd been just an ordinary student of an ordinary high school in Lucky Wind City. He knew fart about the more secretive stuff. However, he suddenly recalled once seeing a book about ancient geography and history of Earth. After remembering what had been written there, he blurted out, "Once I read an odd description. According to rumors, the people before Dark Ages considered science and technology as supreme. They once went on a huge exploration and were able to determine that Earth could be categorized as a huge prison. This huge prison traps all life forms on Earth. According to my understanding, above the sky of the Earth, there is an extremely large cosmos which is home to countless similar planets. If the people of Earth want to break this naturally formed huge prison, the only way to do so is by becoming a true god and smashing the vacuum of Earth. Only then could one become truly free and unfettered. True deities cannot be bound or tied to anything." Lee Yoon-mu told everything he recalled from the ancient geographical and historical records. He had read it when he had just become a fluxer, and at that time, he didn't know the origins of this book. He'd only felt that it was a fantasy story. He'd thought all of it was just a joke. Earth being a natural prison? The cosmos outside the Earth containing countless similar planets? However, when he connected it to the heavenly transformation as well as Battle Sage Jing treating it as the introduction to the matter, he couldn't help but reveal an expression of astonishment. Could the facts written in that book be real? Was there really an infinite cosmos outside Earth which possessed countless stars and life forms? That's right, everything written in that book is true. Battle Sage Jing calmly nodded. Lee Yoon-mu, however, wasn't able to calm his heart. Since he was a person of the new era, he believed that the world which humanity could access only included Earth, 5th, 6th, and 7th dimension along with their counterparts. But at this instant, he was forced to accept that there was a boundless space outside, and Earth was only a minuscule part of it. It is true but also false at the same time. You don't need to be so astonished, these matters are considered as the highest class secrets in the world. Only those who enter the quasi-deity level have the qualifications to learn of them. Even senior domain sages only know a fraction of it and nothing more. But it's different now. Since the heavenly transformation is coming closer and closer, our Earth's destiny is unknown. Therefore, since you have passed the second round of the continental battle, it is time to reveal some of the secrets. Battle Sage Jing calmly continued to narrate the highest class secrets about the Earth which were unknown to ordinary people. Earth being a huge prison is a true fact. It has trapped our people for certain, and only a true God could shatter the vacuum and break through the prison, becoming truly free and unfettered. However, this information hadn't been found on Earth where we are located, Battle Sage Jing said, astonishingly. Yoon-mu. Isn't Earth where we live? Your ladyship, what does this even mean? Don't tell me that this world has another Earth. Li Yoon-mu's heart began to thump loudly. He felt as if a genuine high-level secret was about to be revealed to him. He also sensed that he couldn't turn back now. Since Battle Sage Jing had chosen this time to reveal the matter which only the quasi-deities knew about, then the people who formed the top layer of humanity's power had definitely come to some kind of decision. And Li Yoon-mu didn't possess the power to change it. That's right. In the true Omniverse, this indeed isn't the only Earth. There are 66 of them in parallel universes which are completely identical to our own. The Earth in which we live is only one among the 66. Its plane of existence is the 55th one, and it is known as the 55th Earth plane according to sequence. Boom! Li Yoon-mu's mind went completely blank as if 10,000 tons of explosives had suddenly been lighted inside it, destroying everything. There isn't just one Earth, but 66 identical ones? It's an omniverse? And the Earth on which we're currently located has the number of 55th? This cannot be real. Impossible. Li Yoon-mu subconsciously shook his head violently. When I became a battle sage and learned these secrets, my reaction wasn't any better. Battle Sage Jing didn't continue. She instead gave Li Yoon-mu time to digest everything he'd just heard. After observing that he was slowly calming down, she said, apart from this, there is still a true Earth, which isn't one of the 66 parallel ones. This true Earth is the real Earth, and our 66 parallel Earths are the projections of this true Earth. Another bit of explosive information was dropped on Li Yoon-mu's heart, which had just calmed down, causing it to speed up again. The truth of the heavenly transformation was surprisingly this. It was no wonder then that the quasi-deities standing at the peak of the world had concealed the true facts so deeply that not even other flux sages were able to obtain any information. Chapter 278, Correct Choice. Because if such secrets were leaked outside, they would cause an explosion which would plunge the entire human society into chaos. At this instant, Li Yoon-mu was completely lost. There was a saying, the more you know, the more you worry. This line wasn't one bit wrong. If it was possible, he was willing to become an ordinary person and forget all about this, know nothing like all the normal fluxers. But Battle Sage Jing had just informed him that the Earth he lived on wasn't one of its kind, it was actually one of 66 identical worlds. And on top of that, these 66 Earths weren't even real. There was only one real Earth, and it wasn't the one lived on. All the other Earths in the parallel universe were just the original one's projections. Isn't this simply too frustrating? In other words, the purpose of this time's continental battle is to select participants to send to this real Earth. Li Yoon-mu felt as if his head was going to burst open. That's right, it is to choose people who would descend to this original world. What you described previously, it was of that place, not our Earth. Our Earth is the true cage, completely sealed off. In this place, there is no path above quasi-deities. If you want to obtain a path to go farther, then it can only be found in the original Earth, Battle Sage Jing explained with a hint of hope in her eyes. Then why are you powerhouses choosing Flux disciples to be the first to descend? Li Yoon-mu asked. It's simple, really. You should have already guessed it in your heart. The higher one's power, the harder it is to descend on the original Earth. Therefore, we can only choose the most powerful Flux disciples to represent us. And you are the candidate who will represent Battle Sage Vega and me, Battle Sage Jing replied bluntly. Hearing all this, Li Yoon-mu couldn't help but take in a deep breath. If this was really the case, then the truth wasn't far from what the system had analyzed. All the proud children of heavens were only chess pieces and nothing more. Battle sages, barbarian kings, ocean emperors, these quasi-deities were all trapped within this prison without any path to advance forward. And now all of them wanted their representatives. But for what? It was certainly to rely on them to seize the initiative and occupy the highest authority in the new world. For a while, Li Yoon-mu couldn't think of anything to say to Battle Sage Jing. You don't need to worry. Perhaps other quasi-deities will give you commands to execute, but I and Battle Sage Vega won't be the same. The relationship between the two of us can be considered that of allies. What do you think? Battle Sage Jing laughed faintly. Good, Li Yoon-mu replied firmly. The difference between the power of a battle sage and a Flux disciple was incomparable, like the difference between heaven and earth. But Li Yoon-mu also knew why Battle Sage Vega was seeking to establish an alliance with him, where both parties were on equal status. The reason was very simple. If Li Yoon-mu was chosen as one of the people to descend to the original world, then even if the quasi-deities possessed the power to shake the heavens, they still wouldn't be able to affect his actions in the slightest. The only thing restraining Li Yoon-mu was his family and friends living in this world. Battle Sage Jing understood that Li Yoon-mu was a person with sound logic, so she said in a gentle voice, "You understanding everything so quickly makes things easier. I don't wish for a conflict to exist between the two of us. We both are equal partners in this alliance. Just let me and Vega deal with the problems like the safety of your family and other trifling matters on this side, and I guarantee that nothing will happen to them. You can descend to the main world with no worries. This will also be an opportunity for you and not just a task to find a path forward for me and Vega. I understand. Compared to following in your path after I become a battle sage, it is better to find my own. That way, at least I will be in control of my fate." Li Yoon-mu's voice was extremely firm. Because of his words, Battle Sage Jing became a lot more hopeful. She hadn't expected that this person would think of matters so far in the future. Moreover, he also had such confidence in becoming a battle sage. After pondering for some time, Li Yoon-mu finally gave words to the matter gnawing in his mind. But what should I do about War God Temple? You must know that they had sent a letter of invitation to participate in the trial by fire, which was to enter the continental battle. At this moment, I can be considered as a member of War God Temple. This was the reason why I came as a member of your Li sect. You don't need to worry. From the moment I became a quasi-deity of the mysterious Li sect, War God Temple had already struck off your qualifications. You should be aware that the combined strength of Battle Sage Vega and Battle Sage Jing isn't one whit inferior to that of Battle God. Behind me and Vega stands the central continent, and do you know about the Dual Star Supreme Battlesuit in detail? Before Li Yoon-mu could reply, Battle Sage Jing quickly continued, Dual Star Supreme Battlesuit isn't just one battlesuit, but two of them. One is the Light Star Supreme Battlesuit, while the other is the Dark Star Supreme Battlesuit. Battle Sage Vega took the Light Star, while I, and Jing, took the Dark Star. The inheritance of this dual star battlesuit can only be passed on to people who possess two independent personalities. And me and Vega are its only successor. Hiss! A shiver passed down Li Yoon-mu's spine. The dual star supreme battlesuit surprisingly had such an enormous secret that it wasn't just one suit but two. Vega and Jing, these two had surprisingly obtained the complete inheritance. Instantly, Li Yoon-mu understood many things. It was no wonder that Battle Sage Vega became a battle sage in just a few years, before she even reached 40. During her fortuitous encounter, she must have obtained the complete inheritance of the Dual Star Supreme battle suit. She then would have possessed it from the time she was an ordinary person. Thus, you can be at ease now. Okay. Until this moment, Yoon-mu hadn't said much. But now, he spoke with a serious tone. What is the aim of Battle Sage Vega? To protect our Earth. With the heavenly transformation coming closer and closer, given that the 6 continents aren't unified and there is the behemoth named Fluxor Association, I and Battle Sage Vega are the protectors of our Earth plane. During this conversation, Battle Sage Jing had settled most of the doubts in Yoon-mu's heart. Once she achieved that, she quickly departed. She left behind Yoon-mu, who had a pensive expression on his face. He had already realized what his next action should be, and that his choice to enter an alliance with Battle Sage Vega and Jing was presently the most sensible choice he could make. After all, apart from representing the ruling power of the central continent, Battle Sage Vega was also the most powerful person on the 6 continents, just that no one was aware of this fact. And he, Yoon-mu, was the most valued agent of her. How could entering War God Temple and becoming one of its many representatives compare to this? Battle God had the power of the Transcending Power War God Temple behind him, and under his control, there were already Zhanhua and Ji Wuxin. How could Yoon-mu dip his fingers in with these 2 War God Temple's disciple already present? He would rather be a chicken's head than a phoenix's tail. Yoon-mu was absolutely certain of his choice. Chapter 279, Masters of the 6 Transcending Powers. Yoon-mu used the next 3 days to prepare for the final test where they'd have to enter the depths of Black Dragon Island. By then, he was aware of many things he wasn't before. Knowing that he didn't have much time left in this plane, he decided to stay with his family for the 3 days he had. He also gave 100 million dimensional coins to his sister Lu Ruyan, allowing her to increase the size of her shop. Then he repeatedly reminded Nangang Gongzi, Devil Monkey, and Underworld to take care of his family. As for Flowing Cloud, she was dispatched to stay by Lu Ruyan's side as a helper for the time being. The arrangements made by Battle Sage Vega's side were also very quick. In the real world, his family had already settled down in a manor in Vega City. Now that they had the protection of Battle Sage Vega and Vega Palace, he didn't need to worry about their safety. After making these arrangements, Yoon-mu had a little meet-up with Li Daxiang, Brother Thin and Crooked Teeth Jiang. He gave them some items to help in their future cultivation. In the end, he met with Sister Nuja. After he descended, who could know how long he'd have to stay there? For a while, Yoon-mu's feelings were in disarray. Best of luck, I will also descend to the original world. Next year, I will certainly accomplish that. You must do your best to take care. When they were about to separate, Lu Nuja finally summoned enough courage to take hold of Yoon-mu's hand. She then asked in a firm voice, how do you know about the descending and the matter of the original world? Yoon-mu's heart was moved at first, but then her words shocked him. He was aware that this level of secret was something that only quasi-deities knew well. I won't tell you, but you must take care of yourself. That side is very dangerous, and the original world isn't like the 5th dimension where you were protected by the rules of the world. So you cannot act arrogantly, all right? Lu Nuja had taken the initiative to put her small hand into Yoon-mu's hands. When he felt the softness in his hand as well as the gaze of Lu Nuja filled with concern, it was as if some place in his heart which he had suppressed deeply had been touched. He wasn't able to say anything and could only nod in reply. He didn't continue to question her about her source of information. 3 days after, the 310 contestants gathered before the platform on the Black Dragon Island. This time, the people watching the live broadcast discovered that whether it were the powerhouses atop the platform or the 300-something contests, all of them had very solemn expressions on their faces. The solemn and serious atmosphere caused an invisible tension to seep into everyone's heart. The alliance representative waved his hand, and a black protective cover sprang up around the 310 contestants. This protective cover cut off all sound transmissions. The people outside were left completely astonished by an unimaginable scene. Through the translucent protective cover, they could see that the masters of the 6 transcending powers had gathered together. All of them were now on the Black Dragon Island. This information instantly spread through the 6 continents. People quickly realized that this final test wasn't going to be simple and that something big was about to happen. According to the public's memory, the last time the masters of the 6 transcending powers had appeared together was 36 years ago. At that time, a dimensional crack had appeared on the boundary between the real world and the 7th dimension, which allowed a powerful fiend to enter Earth. This forced the 6 transcending masters to join hands and kill the fiend. 36 years had passed since that event, and no one had expected that these 6 people who were the closest to becoming deities would surprisingly appear together at the continental battle. In fact, not only the people outside, even contestants like Yoon-mu couldn't help but feel the tension in their hearts rise because of the appearance of these 6 people. Bladewood's Master, Blade Sage. Barbarian Shrine's Master, Barbarian Emperor. Ocean Temple's Master, Ocean Monarch. War God Temple's Master, Battle God. Divine Religion's Master, Supreme Pontiff. Frontline Heaven's Master, Frontline God. All the people without exception stared fixedly upon these 6 people. Each of them represented a transcending power, having established a supreme organization in their continent. In this world, these 6 people formed the highest level of humanity's hierarchy. In an instant, everyone turned silent. The masters of the 6 transcending powers didn't say anything for a time. Then, Battle God walked out in front and said, "In the 3rd test, those who won't clear it will die. If there is still anyone among you who wants to forfeit, they can do so now." Battle God adorned a golden-purple battle mask which stopped everyone from seeing his real face. However, there was no one who doubted that he was the most formidable person in the whole world. His words were directed toward people like Yoon-mu, who could be said to represent some sort of power. Battle God's words were to remind those contestants who didn't know the truth that at this stage it was either do or die. Only the few contestants who didn't know about descending to the origin world had the right to choose. But in front of the masters of the 6 transcending powers, there was no one among the 310 contestants who were willing to renounce at this stage, even if it was extremely likely that they'd die in this final test. Apart from facing death, even if you succeed and gain qualifications to descend, it'll be very difficult for you all to return from the original world, Battle God said. This time, in the group of 310 contestants, a few people couldn't remain calm anymore. When they thought that this year's continental battle was related to the heavenly transformation, they instantly realized what they had to do. Although they didn't know the details, the words of Battle God had been quite clear: they'd be descending to the original world. In a short while, 3 people decided to forfeit after some hesitation. Their decision was correct, but also wrong at the same time. It was correct because they weren't any better than the others, and since they didn't represent any power, even on the eve of the final test, they didn't have any clue about the situation. But by giving up, they lost the chance to fight to reach the pinnacle. After a long while, another 4 people withdrew from the competition. They weren't afraid of facing death, but were unable to give up on the worries of this world. At this time, Barbarian Nu and Lin Jian turned toward Yoon-mu. Clearly, they didn't know about the situation, so they wanted his opinion. "This choice may lead you to hell. So make up your mind, but if you choose to remain behind, you must take care of my sister Lu Ruyan until I return." Yoon-mu slightly explained the situation to the 2 of them. As for Li Qinghong, she hadn't wavered in the slightest from the very beginning. Although she didn't know anything about the situation, she wasn't afraid of anything and also have any ties to this world. Demon was the same. All he wanted was to become powerful and reach the peak. "Master, I still have a great hatred which has to be avenged," Blade Overlord Lin Jian said. "Then you should remain behind. With you here, I also won't have to worry about the matter of my family's safety, Yoon-mu said without any hesitation. Chapter 280, Taking Possession of Refining Pagoda. Barbarian Niu also made his decision at this time. He decided to advance with the test and, thus, repeatedly reminded Lin Jian, Blade Overlord, I request you to take care of my younger sister on this side. You don't need to worry, leave all the matters of this world to me, Nangang Gongzi, and the others. Then, Lin Jian left the black cover with complex emotions filling his heart. No one had expected that a follower would surprisingly have the right to make a choice. The majority of people couldn't understand Yoon-mu's way of thinking. Another one forfeited, bringing the number of forfeiters to 9. This left 301 contestants to push onward. Then let's continue with the third round. I wish good luck to you all. When you reach the origin world, I hope we'll all remember to act as one. Regardless of which organization of the 6 continents you come from, you all represent the hope of our 55th Earth's humanity. Battle God concluded his speech, and the next instant, the black protective cover dispersed, allowing Yoon-mu and other 300 contestants see the depths of the Black Dragon Island. Currently, they were located at the head of the Black Dragon. If they entered the depths, they would be going through the large mouth of the enormous Black Dragon. This time's test, as the Alliance's representative had informed them, was to use all methods available to them and reach the rear part of this Black Dragon. In other words, they needed to reach the Black Dragon's tail. To reach the eastern end from the western end of Black Dragon Island required one to move past 272 kilometers. But could this test be so simple? If the final test had been so simple, it wouldn't have caused the masters of the 6 transcending powers to appear together. Before the start, Yoon-mu and the other contestants were provided with a small insignia by the Alliance's representative. The number 55 was engraved upon the insignia by some special method, and on the rear part, there was a famous sacred mountain rising out of the ocean. This mountain was the highest peak on Earth and thus represented their world. It was known as Sacred Beast Mountain. During the Dark Ages, this Sacred Beast Mountain was the habitat of the sage beasts which were only exterminated by the unwavering persistence of humans. From then on, this highest mountain peak came to be known as the Sacred Beast Mountain. It had been the home to countless sage beasts as well as the sacred place which was the best representative of this world. Thus, the contestants were all familiar with the number 55 at the front as well as the picture of Sacred Beast Mountain at the rear. The number 55 represents our world's position and the Sacred Beast Mountain represents the highest peak in the world which is the best picture to represent our world. Many people clearly understood the meaning of the insignia. It didn't possess any special functions and was only an identification symbol. However, it had the power to remind all the contestants that in the end, they were all fighting for the same goal. Only the small group of people who weren't aligned with any strong powers felt that there was some unfathomable mystery behind the number 55. But at this time, the third round had already begun. Almost all contestants chose to form groups. Social gathering was innate to humans, and under this sort of unknown circumstances, forming groups was the best choice. Yoon-mu with his 3 followers entered the depths of the Black Dragon Island along with everyone. The people watching the live broadcast followed departing people with their eyes, the figures growing blurry as they advanced. Finally, their silhouettes disappeared within the dragon mist. It's as I expected. This dragon mist is indeed too queer. I can sense that I won't be able to use my flux energy as effectively as before. As the contestants entered the dragon's mouth, the black fog continued to grow thicker and thicker, limiting the visibility to several tens of meters. Even fluxers who were said to have keener senses than ordinary people could barely see past 30 meters. This black fog was known as dragon mist by the people. When the Black Dragon Island was a forbidden island, even if a battle sage entered the dragon mist, he would also lose his life. But presently, the masters of the 6 transcending powers had joined hands to use some special method to remove the seal. The flux disciples were able to enter the dragon mist, but they soon discovered the suppression of their flux energy. As they went deeper, the degree of suppression grew stronger. It now made sense why the previous two tests were physical strength test and soul strength test. In all likelihood, they were just a preparation for this final test. The people who couldn't clear those tests would basically be crippled after entering the depths with the dragon mist. The higher the cultivation base, the stronger the suppression. I've just confirmed that although some seals in this forbidden island have been removed, not all of them are gone, so only we can enter. If a flux master entered here, the outcome would probably be the same as before. They would wander lost here till the moment they died. Any contestant who had reached this level could be considered one of the formidable flux disciples of the 6 continents, so naturally, they were quite knowledgeable. Quickly, they speculated, analyzed, and concluded the present situation of the Black Dragon Island. By now, the 301 contestants had all separated into groups of 2s and 3s. There was almost no person that was acting solitary. Many people didn't understand much. According to them, if the 301 contestants formed a group and advanced jointly, then this final test should be quite simple, right? Brother Lee, we meet each other again. At this moment, H.A.C.K led 2 other contestants toward Lee Yoon-mu. Under the astounded gazes of many people, H.A.C.K walked to Lee Yoon-mu and quietly said, "I wonder if Brother Lee has brought the void disc with himself. I have it on me and can exchange at any time." Lee Yoon-mu wasn't afraid that the opponent would launch a sneak attack after coming close. No opponent would launch a sneak attack on a person who possessed such terrifying defense unless they had some mental illness. Wonderful. Brother Lee indeed keeps his promises. A shine immediately appeared in H.A.C.K's eyes. He immediately took out the 2 parts of the refining pagoda as well as an original manuscript. That's right, 2 parts of refining pagoda as well as an A-grade battle skills complete manuscript of S.H.A.D.W was the full price decided by the negotiation between S.H.A.D.W and Lee Yoon-mu. Lee Yoon-mu hinted at Lee Ching-hong, and she immediately understood what he wanted. She walked forward to take the original manuscript. After skimming through it, she nodded, implying that the other party's manuscript wasn't fake. Good. From now on, all the accounts between Brother Lee and S.H.A.D.W have been settled. Both sides immediately completed the exchange within the dragon mist, which was becoming thicker and thicker. H.A.C.K looked with delight at the void disc in his hand, and both his eyes began to shine. He seemed to be in a daze, thinking of something. Lee Yoon-mu also revealed a slight smile. Both parties were satisfied with the trade. Brother Ching, I'm slightly confused. You're about to descend into the main world, so don't tell me that you brought the other 5 transcending sage tools with you. Lee Yoon-mu asked, feigning stupidity. This doesn't need to concern Brother Lee. I have methods to deliver this back to the section. H.A.C.K's expression hardened for an instant, then changed to the widest smile. He then immediately turned and walked away with his companions without bidding farewell. There is something wrong with this H.A.C.K. It's impossible for him to deliver void disc back to the sect, Demon whispered faintly. Those 2 companions of his are also quite dangerous. I saw them at the death zone too, Lee Yoon-mu agreed, nodding. Last time, Lee Yoon-mu hadn't attacked them because he had some apprehensions about their mysteriousness. Their presence made him uncomfortable. At this instant, Lee Yoon-mu suddenly thought of something. Could Lee King-hong's previous words about Chao Tian gathering 6 transcending sage tools to create a killing spell and becoming the 7th transcending power have been false? Instantly, Lee Yoon-mu had a dreadful premonition. This H.A.C.K was probably bringing the 6 transcending tools into the origin world. What could Chao Tian sect be thinking about?